Sir, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, we're knee deep in a lot of things, but everything's about Graham Cassidy. That's all I hear. So, what's going on in the trenches of Graham Cassidy and trying to push this through?
Well, we're trying to get reform. We said that we would repeal and replace. We're working to do so. There's a lot of people, obviously, on the left trying to push back. And to hear them, you'd think that the system was working very well, no problems at all. And,
it's true.
And in fact, I was on Stephen Colbert 2 nights ago, and it's the hue and cry is the states can't do this. You can't turn anything over to governors or state legislatures. And I just beg to differ. That's what was said, when we did welfare reform in 1986. Was that, you couldn't do it. It would be a race to the bottom. You can't trust these governors. And, well, it worked very well.
You mean the welfare reform that Bill Clinton keeps talking he was the champion of? That one?
That one. That's the one. But the reality is that government closest to the people usually works best. People point out, well, there are no guarantees that essential benefits will be maintained or protections for pre-existing conditions. Well, the same is true today. There's no constitutional guarantee that those are going to remain, but the Congress has made the decision that that's going to be protected. And believe me, elected officials respond to their constituents. And right now, my constituents are telling me the exchange in Arizona isn't working. 200,000 Arizonans will wake up this morning without insurance. They've paid the fine to the federal government, but they still can't pay. They can't find affordable insurance. So they've paid the fine and still have no insurance. And an even greater number have a policy, but they can't afford to use it because deductibles and copays are too high. So this has got to change, and people are really hurting.
So I guess the question is, the people who say that there's no guarantees, are these the same people that told me that I could keep my doctor and my health plan? I just want to make sure.
That would be about one and the same. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, that's it. And we're still waiting CBO score for Monday. There will be amendments allowed on the floor. This will be under reconciliation. So, this has a ways to go, but I'm glad there's still an opportunity to fix this thing. And this isn't the be-all, end-all. To fix something going forward for the long term, obviously it's going to require a bipartisan solution, but this is a good first step.
Not that, anyone, the paper down here wants this to happen. So instead of talking about 200,000 Arizonans can't use their health insurance or have any, the headline down here through Howard Fisher's article through the Capital Times was, Arizona stands to lose $1.7 billion under Graham Cassidy, budget analysts say. So what does Jeff Flake say to that story? The lead down here is $1.7 billion is going to, quote, disappear. What do you say?
Well, there will be some different numbers coming out from the governor's office today. My understanding is those figures didn't take into account the contingency account that's going to be set up, $15 billion. It just doesn't operate on complete information. As you know, Governor Ducey has looked at this very carefully and has come out in support of it. He would like additional flexibility. All states would. And like with welfare reform, they find better and more efficient ways to actually run a program, as Arizona does now. Access, we run that program and deliver health care for lower-income Arizonans about a third as cheap as New Yorkers or others. And so, and this is part of the problem, too. Right now, under Medicaid, our total Medicaid spending nationwide, just 5 states consume 50% of that. 40% of that amount. 40% of that amount go to just 5 states: New York, California, Massachusetts, Maryland, and that's simply not fair. And if you're Pennsylvania, who covers twice as many people for a third the cost or a third the reimbursement from the federal government that Massachusetts does, for example, you're going to say this isn't fair.
So it sounds like there's a little scuttlebutt that Graham and Cassidy are going to try to get Murkowski to vote by doing a carve out for Alaska. Are you a little worried that we're going to start the carve out train for folks to get some, like maybe now everyone's going to ask for their carve out after they go for Murkowski? How do you think that's the dynamics of that's going to play out?
I doubt that. I mean, Alaska is a different kind of case.
Right.
You have as many people live in Mesa, where I am, as live in Alaska.
Sure.
But in Alaska, they're scattered over territory about a quarter the size of the United States. And it's a different kind of case. It's always had higher spending per person. But I don't think you're going to see a rush like you did before Obamacare with the Cornhusker kickback, the Louisiana Purchase, and those kind of things. That's that got pretty obscene.
So what do you think the process on Graham Cassidy is going to? Again, anything can change. It can change 3 seconds from now. As things are kind of holding, what do you think this might look at right now?
The leader, McConnell, has said he wants to bring it to the floor this coming week, and so there are timelines. You have to have cloture and specific waiting periods between votes, and I haven't seen that timeline. But my guess is it may be a Thursday vote next week.
Who is now? Of course, you're probably getting hammered from 14 million directions right now on this.
We are,
and in addition to some, the actual independent, regular individuals that are calling. What are some of the big parts of the business world of this? Of the hospitals, because they seem to be the one that should be worried the most about, because they've had all their bills, a lot of their bills paid by taxpayers over the years.
Right. They want to make sure, hospitals obviously, that they aren't faced with a lot of uncompensated care. Rural hospitals in particular are in a particularly fragile condition. And that is recognized, and that's why the bill provides some contingency funds for special cases in states that have large rural populations. Obviously, doctor groups are concerned about it, but boy, the biggest concern continues for families to find affordable care.
Yep.
And then another problem is, obviously, with Medicaid, it has to be sustainable to the long term. And right now, Medicaid spending, we're going about the rate of medical inflation plus 1 or 2%, depending on the population you're covering. By definition, that is not sustainable. We've got to find a way to bring that down, and that's why having the states, giving the states more flexibility to cover people more like Arizona is doing. If the rest of the country covered its Medicaid population as efficiently as Arizona, then we would be bringing down the cost of health care considerably for lower income Americans.